Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Jon Hubbard, shareholder and consultant here at Boomer Consulting. And with me today is Marc Staut. Marc, thank you for being on this episode of the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Jon.
All right. Marc is also a shareholder here at Boomer. He also serves as our Chief Innovation and Technology Officer. And so we're going to be talking about a topic that's in your title, Marc. So it's right up your alley. And that is why an innovation leader is necessary. Now, firms have been hearing about innovation for many years, and probably there's different perspectives on what innovation is, maybe why it's important, what it means, to their firm. But something we're seeing, and I've heard you speak about before, is actually establishing an innovation leader in firms. So why is having an innovation leader necessary?
Absolutely. And the first thing to getting to the answer to that question, Jon, is understanding what innovation is and isn't. A lot of times people think of innovation as, wow, we're going to get in a room and we're all going to have markers and we're going to go to the whiteboard and we're going to write down a whole bunch of million or billion-dollar ideas. And then we're going to go out and we're going to do all these. And that's not really what innovation is. That is, that's kind of brainstorming, and that is a piece of innovation. But to truly be innovative these days, it's way more than scribbling down an idea on a napkin and saying, hey, let's go do this. There really has to be a process that is involved in innovation. You have to collect those ideas. You have to get them from everybody inside your firm. You have to create a culture of innovation where those ideas are nurtured and supported and invested in. You have to fight to keep those projects alive until they have proven or disproven themselves. You have to kill the ones that are not working. You have to elevate the ones that are working. And then you get to make it real. You actually have to take those ideas and take them to the market and turn them into real service lines or real ideas or real changes in the process of your firm. So there's a lot of things that go into innovation, and thinking that it's just going to magically happen by writing down a couple of ideas is definitely a fallacy. And it's one that a lot of firms are starting to realize. There are innovation leaders that are stepping into key roles throughout firms. Some of the biggest firms are starting to have chief innovation officers. We're starting to see that as something that they're investing in, and they understand that that is a process. Smaller firms, you're not going to necessarily have a full-time person that is there doing that, but you are going to have someone who is responsible and accountable for creating that culture of innovation and making sure that your firm is thinking of those ideas and looking for those opportunities and moving them through a defined process so that they can thrive and make a real difference.
And really what I hear you saying, Marc, is it's changing people's perception of what innovation actually is. Because I know from my vantage point, sometimes I see innovation in firms kind of be categorized as something that happens once or twice a year. Maybe it happens over a day or two. And I think you used the word magic. There's some magic to it. Maybe it's a spark. It's someone stands up and says something and all of a sudden there's innovation. And that's really not what you're talking about. You're talking about how you create a framework, a process, leadership around that makes it more of a continual function and an operation of a firm and less of a one-time event that's uncontrollable. So as firms think about, yes.
That's absolutely right, Jon. And what happens so often is firms will carve out a little bit of time at their strategic planning or their partner retreat for innovation, and they'll come up with some great ideas. And then they revisit them a year later at the next strategic planning or the next partner retreat, and they say, well, what has happened with this? And nothing has happened with it because there is no process to turn those brilliant ideas into actuality, into reality, making it real, making it happen.
Yeah, no, that's great, Marc. And I think we've all been a part of those conversations where, hey, didn't we talk about this last year? What did happen to that? Marc, I know you and I are both part of Dan Sullivan's program, Strategic Coach. And he has a book out called Who Not How. And I think you're highlighting this concept a little bit of as we think about an innovation leader, establishing a who that can help influence the how. So as firms think about, well, should we have someone leading innovation in our firm? And if so, who should that be? What advice or attributes or tips would you give as someone kind of answers those questions?
Yeah, I think there's really three critical roles that need to happen. There's the role of the visionary, the making it up, right? Those are those sparks, those ideas, those light bulbs that go off at 3 in the morning. But then there's the middle section, which is the person who's going to make it real, right? They're the ones who are going to say, well, that is a good idea. How would we actually do this though? I think of the visionary as saying, hey, we're at step A and we should be at step E. And they say, get us there. But who do they tell to get us there? That really is your innovation leader in many cases. They're the ones who can see that process through and say, this idea has some real legs. Here's how we can make this truly something that could happen, as opposed to just again, cocktail napkin scribblings. Then there's actually a third part, which is the make it happen. So you have to have all three of those pieces: make it up, make it real, and make it happen. And the make it happen people are the ones who, once the idea has been fleshed out, once you have defined what it is that's going to happen, what it looks like, oftentimes they're the ones who execute on that project. So they're not, each role does not have to be separate from the other. Your innovation leader may be a visionary, but they have to have that make it real skill. They may have some of the make it happen skills. They may be a project manager as well, but they still have to have that make it real skill. So you can kind of mix and match in the firm. But what oftentimes happen is you get a visionary who has this amazing idea and they hand it to the project managers or the people who are going to be executing on this, and they don't really know what to do. They would do it if they knew how, but they don't have a clear sense of how to get from the steps A to E. They need someone to define B, C, D as well.
Can you speak a little bit? And I love how you just broke that down. Can you speak a little bit to, and I think you would agree with this, that, the make it up isn't, even though it's coming from someone that has a vision for an idea, doesn't necessarily always translate to, hey, only the top people in the organization can have those ideas, and then it gets passed down. And for those
Right.
listening and not watching the video, I'm using air quotes, right? Passed down to someone else to actually execute. I think you would agree, Mark, that those make it up ideas can come from any direction. Can you
Not
speak to
just
that a little
could,
bit?
they should. They absolutely should. Because if you are looking at this from a top-down perspective, you're only going to have that perspective of the higher level strategy, right? You've moved up. You're not really doing a lot of the work at the bottom levels anymore, and you're starting to have a different perspective of how the firm operates. There is value in looking from the bottom up. So we can say, look, there could be some innovation that is allowing us to be much more efficient, much more effective, that we can do new things or new ways. There's all different types of innovation that we can look at. We can do new things. We can stop doing things. All of those are considered innovation. But you also want to look at it from all the different perspectives within the firm. So building that culture of innovation where every idea is important. Every idea gets looked at and considered. This is where an innovation action committee really comes into play, because you have that multi-dimensional group of people who are going to look at it from different perspectives and say, wow, that really is a good idea. Whereas if it's just the top, they may not understand where the impact could be of some of those ideas.
Yeah. Okay, this has been great. So we kind of started with what I would say is changing the definition a little bit, or at least the perception of what innovation is within a firm. Now we've talked about some of the attributes of leadership in this area, maybe some of the components around why having a leader in this area is critical and the roles there. Typically on this podcast, Mark, we talk about results related to, what type of results should a firm expect as it relates to the topic we're discussing. I kind of want to couple that question with, why should firms really figure this out? Why should they be innovating, and maybe you can share a result or two you've seen firms have.
Well, I can actually, one of the biggest questions that people come up with is how do you actually quantify your investment in innovation? It is incredibly difficult to do because you're not just in, you are giving yourselves options further down the road. So things that you invest in today that you think you're going to need tomorrow or in 2 years or in 3 years, you are hedging against a particular future. You want to make sure that you have that opportunity if a certain set of facts come to pass, or presumptions, I guess would be a better way to put that. If those presumptions turn into facts, you'll be ready for those. But it's really hard to kind of quantify those investments because they really are options against the future. So one of the things that I like to talk to firms about and coach them through when we're consulting on innovation is, if you look at your overall innovation investment and you break it down into your core investments, which is really you're optimizing what you're currently doing, your adjacent investments, your expansion of existing capabilities, or your transformational investments. Transformational are the things that you're not doing yet. They're breakthroughs. Those are your Uber of some things, right? Those are the big ones. Most of your investment in innovation, 70% of it is going to go to your core. And you can expect about a 10% payoff off of that 70% investment. Your adjacent is 20%. And you can expect about a 20% payoff of that as well. So an additional 20% on top of there. The transformational part, that's the breakthrough. Those are the big, those are the moonshots, as it were. 10% of your innovation investment can turn into a 70% return. So those are the ones that really pay off. So if you're not thinking about each of these different things, if you're looking for an opportunity that is right in front of you and that is going to pay off in 6 months, you're not looking at those transformational opportunities. So thinking about those is really, really important. And again, this is where investing in an innovation action committee, investing in an innovation program can really help change the way your firm is thinking about these things and help move it further on that scale.
That's great, Marc. So as we kind of round out our conversation here, and you started to touch on it a little bit too around an innovation action committee or an innovation program. I'm sure you got our listeners' wheels spinning. Maybe they're thinking about, all right, I want to have a conversation or two when I get into the office or after this meeting, or, I want to move this forward in our firm. What's your recommendation on maybe the next step or two that they take?
I would recommend that firms be intentional about innovation, that they commit to creating a culture of innovation and an innovation process, and that they designate an innovation leader, again, either full-time, part-time, somebody who's inspired by it. Too many times firms are hoping for an accidental innovation. They're gonna stumble on something, or they're waiting for that light bulb that is just going to change everything. And it's possible. It's definitely not out of the realm of possibility. But if you are intentional about it, you are much more likely to succeed. You're much more likely to be prepared for an uncertain future, and not only prepared, but profiting in an uncertain future. So think of innovation as a process. Think of it as an investment. Be intentional and get somebody to guide you through that process.
Excellent advice, Marc. Well, Marc, that's all the time we have for this episode of the podcast. But as always, thank you for being on. And for our listeners, if you like the conversation Marc and I just had, go ahead and subscribe to our podcast. We release new episodes every Tuesday morning. Knock on wood, we have not missed one yet in the last 70, 75 weeks, something like that. So we're running pretty strong here. But one common theme among every episode we release, and we start each episode with this intro, and that is what we're going to be talking about we feel is critical to your firm's success. So thank you for listening. Go ahead and subscribe and stay tuned for next week. Thanks so much.
Thank you.